the past week has been a very sad time for emulation and game preservation. Last week, Nintendo filed a lawsuit against the developers of Yuzu. Yuzu, the most popular Nintendo Switch emulator, covered by outlets like Modern Vintage Gamer, Linus Tech Tips, and tons of others. If you knew about Switch emulation, you knew about Yuzu. In their lawsuit, Nintendo claims it unlawfully circumvents the technological measures that prevent Switch games from being played on other hardware, waives any notion of legitimate use of Yuzu. To be clear, there is no lawful way to use Yuzu to play Nintendo Switch games, including because it must decrypt the game's encryption. And also focus quite a bit on the latest Zelda release, Tears of the Kingdom, because as tends to happen with Nintendo, this is not a one-time thing. It seems to happen with every major release. There are leaks, and games get released early, and one of those people who got the game early decided to dump the entire game on the internet, which Nintendo claims infringing copies of the game that circulated online were able to be played in Yuzu, and those copies were successfully downloaded from pirate websites over 1 million times before the game was published and made available for lawful purchase by Nintendo. Many of the pirate websites specifically noted the ability to play the game file in Yuzu. Now, this 1 million times number has been said many, many times, but to the best of my knowledge, it does not actually have a citation. It is just a number they keep saying. The lawsuit also says the harm caused to Nintendo by Yuzu is manifest and irreparable. There is certainly some debate to be had about whether Yuzu was promoting the fact that Tears of the Kingdom was playable before the release, but what is not debatable is what they said after the release, because basically as soon as they were able to, they said Tears of the Kingdom is playable in Yuzu. Full speed on most hardware, experience in 4K or higher, no hacks needed, 60 FPS, cheats, and more with mods. Honestly, all of this just sounds like a better way to play the game, because the Switch is ancient hardware, and yeah, you can emulate modern games better than they run on the actual system. At least right now, there aren't really any Switch games that I care about, but I totally understand why if you want to play this game, this is the way you'd want to play it. Now, they were also mentioning the fact that it is available in both their mainline release and their early access release. The early access release is the release they had behind the Patreon paywall. Due to this lawsuit being filed and the fact that Yuzu wasn't a small open source project, they were making about $30,000 a month. A lot of people expect this to be a very long and drawn out lawsuit, something we'd probably be following for years into the future. But that's not what happened. I don't know if they got cold feet. I don't know if their lawyers told them something, were like, hey, you're probably going to lose this. But they folded basically immediately and settled to pay $2.4 million to Nintendo. Now, silver lining here, if this went to court and Nintendo did win, they would be paying a lot more money if Nintendo got their way. Nintendo was seeking statutory damages of $2,500 per violation of the DMCA's anti-circumvention and anti-trafficking provisions, and $150,000 per violation of Nintendo's copyright, although it may opt for actual damages to be determined at trial. How much they would end up paying if Nintendo got their way? It would probably bankrupt the developers for the rest of their lives. Alongside the settlement, they also had to go and shut down the website, the GitHub, the Discord, and all of the other material they owned related to Yuzu. Now, in the Modern Vintage Gamer video, he made a really good point about why they might have chose to settle. Not just the fact that they could have paid considerably more money, but also that if they did lose at court, this could set a really bad precedent for future emulation. You'll often hear people say things like, emulation is legal, emulation is allowed, anybody is allowed to emulate, but that's very much a jurisdiction by jurisdiction thing, and if you have a case where an emulator actually does get shut down, that is going to be used in future cases where Nintendo or other companies might try to go after other emulators, and you might get to a point where that's not something you can really say anymore. Now, if it wasn't already obvious, not a lawyer, just a dude ranting in his bedroom, but I have a feeling that when they spoke to legal counsel, their lawyers probably said, you know, you probably made a mistake here, possibly in their Discord, not moderating people talking about piracy, and that would have absolutely been used against them in court. I don't know what the result would have been, but the fact that they folded so quickly, when they did actually have money to fight this for quite a while, probably is because their lawyers said there is a good chance you might not actually win this. Alongside the fact they did have those paywalled early builds and also making patches specifically in some cases for unreleased games, I don't know what their legal counsel told them, but I would not be surprised if it was something along those lines. However, the saddest part here isn't even just Yuzu. It's the other project that Yuzu was involved with, the other project they started, Citra. Citra is a 3DS emulator, and everything for that project has also been shut down as collateral as well. And the message that replaced both these websites honestly doesn't even feel like it's just from Yuzu's legal counsel. It feels like Nintendo wrote this themselves and were like, you have to post this. If you do not post this, we are not accepting the settlement. We write today to inform you that Yuzu and Yuzu's support of Citra are being discontinued, effective immediately. Yuzu and its team have always been against piracy. We started the projects in good faith, out of passion for Nintendo and its consoles and games, and were not intending to cause harm. But we see now that because our projects can circumvent Nintendo's technological protection measures and allow users to play games outside of authorized hardware, like, this feels like Nintendo's legal team. They have led to extensive piracy. In particular, we have been deeply disappointed when users have used our software to leak game content prior to its release and ruin the experience for legitimate purchasers and fans after they promote. Like, again, this feels like Nintendo's legal team. We have come to the decision that we cannot continue to allow this to occur. Piracy was never our intention, and we believe that piracy of video games and on video game consoles should end. Effective today, we will be pulling our code repositories offline, discontinuing our Patreon accounts and Discord servers, and soon shutting down our website. We hope our actions will be a small step toward ending piracy of all creators' works. Thank you for years of support and for understanding our decision. Our decision when Nintendo has a gun to the back of your head, basically. Now, thankfully, neither of these emulators are proprietary emulators. I really don't know why anyone does proprietary emulator work. It always ends in disaster. So, Yuzu was licensed under GPL v3 or later, Citra under GPL v2 or later. I don't know why they use different licenses. That's something you'd have to ask the developers themselves. Now, because of this, there are mirrors and some forks that do exist. The first one I want to highlight is not one made in response to this situation, but one that's been around for quite a while now, that being Pineapple EA. So I mentioned before, they had those paywall builds on Patreon. This has existed for a very long time to leak those paywall builds before they become part of the mainline build. And it's still here. Now, it doesn't have full access to the Git history. It is only pulling in those early builds and making sure that everything is here. So if you want the full user history, you're gonna have to look somewhere else. But there is still the latest early access build available, and you can still go and download it. Now, because Yuzu is dead, they also decided to release this, Pineapple Secrets, which explained how they were actually getting the early access builds before they were supposed to be able to get them. Basically, there was no security on the API, so you could just grab them if you happen to know an API key. Like, there was nothing that was really concerning there. You could just pull them down. But they've added this to their website. Welcome, hi, sorry. We're taking the downloads down to hopefully evade the Big N's wrath. We have a little write-up on how we made everything work, which you can find on our GitHub. That's the write-up I just showed you before. Don't worry, we've backed up the builds. I don't know what they mean by they've deleted it, because it's all literally still here. Maybe they had a download link on their website, but Yeah, it's on the GitHub, so as long as the GitHub's open, you can still just go and grab it. There is also another project called Yuzu Mirror. There is very minor changes being made here. Basically, it's just documentation changes. Maybe they will continue this as an actual project, but at this stage, it seems like that's not what's going to happen. Now, there was also another project that basically just popped up out of nowhere. The user had absolutely no Git history. The project was called Yuzu. Now, the user having no Git history isn't bad in and of itself. Some people like to make second accounts to do things like this so they're not directly connected to their main account and things like that. But you can see what's happened to it. Tech journalists in giant air quotes, saw that this existed and just ran with it. So WCCF Tech, Yuzu, Nintendo Switch emulator, lives on with the Yuzu. This was about an hour after it existed. There was nothing being done on the project yet. Here is another one from eTechnics. Nintendo's killed Yuzu. Long live Yuzu and Suyu. And here is a user called PC Focus. Yuzu will live under a new name, Yuzu. Yuzu is an open source Nintendo Switch emulator designed for legal usage and developed with portability in mind. It is written in C++ and actively maintained for Windows and Linux platforms. At this point, there was literally zero active maintenance. It was just created hours ago. You may also notice the community note here. This is an incomplete mirror, no references to submodules and Git history, which is likely not going to be developed. It includes invite to a non-existent Discord server and wiki pages. So this did have stuff on it. Now it's just one commit. The user started deleting licenses and various other parts of the code and then replaced the entire project with this. Hi guys, just want to say thanks for the support, even if many of you hated me for doing this, or even stressed me a little. This is my fault. Sorry for the mess. Thanks to you all. Thanks to all of you. I feel no sympathy for this user because they opened up a Patreon the second they made the fork. They weren't doing anything yet. They just made a Patreon and it wasn't gonna go anywhere because this is what they posted over on Reddit. Important post. We need developers. Otherwise, Yuzu is not really possible. You were able to help with Yuzu? Then DM me when possible. This user didn't just have no Git history, they were not a developer. There is also another project called Suyu. Now, Suyu looks, if you look at it with really blurry vision, like an actual fork of Yuzu that is being developed. Until you look at the Git history made so far, almost every single commit here is a commit changing documentation. There is one actual real change. It's a very, very minor change, but a real change. When they can demonstrate they can actually modify the code, I will believe this is an actual fork that maybe you should support. Right now, though, there isn't really a fork of Yuzu that is actually making progress. Right now, if you don't want to work on a fork yourself, there are two options available. One, use the last available build of Yuzu. The second option, which I think is much better in the long run, is support the actual other Switch emulator, that being Ryujinx. This has a slightly different aim to Yuzu. They aim for perfect emulation. So sometimes things end up running slower than they would on Yuzu, but it is an actual project that has been going on for many years now. Also, it is licensed under the MIT license, so once again, not a proprietary emulator. Now, Citra and 3DS emulation in general is in a much worse state. To the best of my knowledge, there isn't a mirror of Citra that has full Git history available. Someone probably has the code out there, but hasn't made it available online yet. And there are other 3DS emulators that do exist. The first one being Panda3DS. This is licensed under GPL v3, but it's still very experimental compared to Citrus, and the known working games list is considerably smaller. There is another project called Mikage. This is a proprietary emulator. They do say that eventually they'll make it open source, but as we've seen from some projects that say that, they never actually do so. So for all intents and purposes, this is proprietary. Once again, it's also very, very experimental in probably a worse state than Panda3DS. To make matters worse, at least the Switch is still in production and you can buy actual hardware from Nintendo. The 3DS, however, that's not the case and you're going to have to deal with the secondhand market. Now, at least with the 3DS, there are flash carts that do exist. You can load ROMs onto those. There is some work being done on the Switch for that, and things are a lot weirder in that case. So it's not entirely bad, but 3DS emulation has been set back a really long way. At least with the Switch, there was another project in a good state. Do I think this is always going to be the case and no one is going to properly fork Yuzu or Citra? Absolutely not. If somebody out there has the knowledge to do so and lives somewhere where they're not going to get screwed by Nintendo's lawyers, somebody is going to do it. Right now, though, nobody has done so, and I don't know if anyone even talking about doing it that I would trust right now. So yeah, emulation has taken a massive hit recently. We've been set back quite a number of years, but things will live on. This is not the first time Nintendo has tried to shut down an emulator, and this will not be the last time. It's going to keep happening, and people who actually want to do it, who have the knowledge to do so, are going to keep doing it. And those people should be supported, and when I find one, I will let you guys know about it. So, if you liked the video, go like the video. If you really liked the video, one of these people over here. Check out Patreon, subscribe to Robertson, linked in the description down below. If you want to know more about the technical and legal stuff, I'll leave the Modern Vintage Gamer video link down below, so check that one out as well. That's gonna be it for me. I've got more videos to record, so I'm gonna go. What